kids would stick their head in a bucket of trash to get my sticker. The unknown is kind of what you have to fight against. You just have no idea. So I know that sounds kind of hippie or like really philosophical. People gave a shit about instrument. So we outgrew every space we ever moved into. So I would just get up in my underwear and go to work. Every tough conversation you have is like a little mini launch point. And I get a text like, hey man, I think your building's on fire. And I'm like, son of a, dude, we're not leaving.
1, 2, 3, 4.
He's no one, she's no one, we're no one.
All right, we're here with our buddy and longtime cohort, Vince Lavecchia.
That's
Imported
me.
for Vermont, living in Portland. Had the pleasure of building the industry's biggest digital agency here in town called Instrument. Has segued from that and now is doing some consulting gigs over in Bend. And we'll get more into that as we get through the podcast today.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to open up with something special for you.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I got a gift.
Oh no.
Opening gift.
Dude, I didn't bring a gift.
That's okay. But we'll take these and
Does this gotta have some, oh, I know what this is.
you might know what this is. This could feel very familiar.
Is this an original?
No.
You made these?
I made these today.
Oh my God. With the Nemo tape on the back.
It might have been a subliminal thing I might have done
Dude,
there, but
This
yeah.
is the original photo.
That's a sticker.
No, but I mean is
It
like,
is. Yeah, that was the original
we
photo.
retook this photo one day at Instrument.
Oh, did you?
Ryan Garber was like, we need to recreate it. And I'm like, really? So we did it. But you always know the original because my
That's the
beard is
OG.
brown instead of gray.
This happens with years and years. But I think this is a great place to start with this story because, again, I'd love to hear your version of what this picture means, and I'll share you my 2 cents.
Yeah.
And then I'll send you my invoice at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I owe you a lot. Well, I mean, dude, I brought you to Sun River to shoot the Backhill snowboarding team.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like Sean and Mikey Renz and Luke Matrani, and we went down to shoot at Bachelor.
Yep.
And it was you and Scott Needham. And it was like 3 a.m, and Trevor's like, I got this cool portrait rig. I'm going to set it up in the garage. We need to go test it out. And I'm like, okay, man. It was late, 3 a.m. or whatever. We go out, and you sit me in front of this plywood board with the lights, and you say, stick your head through this hole. I'm like, what do you want me to do? He's like, make some funny faces. So I make some funny faces, and then this thing ends up getting back to the Burton marketing department, and somebody there, I think it was Liam Maher, made a little sticker of it just as a fun like promo. And then Blotto got a hold, I'm going through the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Blotto got a hold of the sticker, and this is before memes. I mean, this is like an early meme, and it fit perfectly on the back of like the old Trio 750s, like the old mobile phones. It was a perfect size sticker to fit on stuff, 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. And it was this face. And then Blotto was traveling the world with Burton, to go on photo shoots and stuff. And this sticker ended up getting stuck on every lift tower or like wherever he could put them. And then I started getting photos of the sticker in places all over the world. And so I saved all those.
Ooh.
So I have photos of your photo, the sticker, on all these random, urinals and like lift towers. And then kids, Blotto was at Hood, they're doing summer camps. And they made kids do ridiculous things to get stickers at Hood. And kids would stick their head in a bucket of trash to get my sticker.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Damn.
So, I don't know. It just became a thing. And then Burton used it on a U.S. Open poster. And I never got paid for any of that.
But this was my favorite part.
Is that when...
And this is a picture of the U.S. Open.
Oh, yeah.
And Burton had built a whole bunch of these faces, these masks.
So here's the story on that.
Tell me.
So Burton, I didn't know they did it, but they made these heads on a stick at the Open. What year? 90? No, it had to be
22?
99?
99?
99,
No.
99-ish.
Yeah.
And so I'm at the top of the pipe doing my job, like making sure riders had water and their bindings are fixed or whatever. And I look down the pipe, and coming up the walls of the pipe are these heads just bouncing, coming up towards me. And because Liam Griffin was down at the bottom, like, take this and go up. He's up there. Go find him. So they sent all these kids running up the pipe to find me with these things. And then they kind of used it as like an image for the Open for years. You remember Gary Land took these, stuck them in the snow on the side of the pipe and was taking photos with this in the foreground at the U.S. Open pipe.
No idea.
There's a pretty good Keir Dillon shot, like in the middle of a McTwist, and this is in the foreground, stuck in the snow. It just kind of lived on. But I don't usually make faces like this.
No.
And I think that's why it stood out.
It stood out.
It's like I'm a pretty normal, whatever. You know, so
regular
it's
dude,
like,
right?
Yeah. I remember showing it to my mom, and the first thing she picked out was like, "Why is your hair like that?" I've got the devil ears. You know? She hated it. She was like, "What? Why did you do that?" I don't know.
It's 3 a.m. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just did it.
Yeah. And that was Shaun White was on that shoot.
Yeah.
And wasn't Gary's kid, Jerry Lopez's kid there too?
Probably.
And
I mean,
Mikey
Sean
Rentz and-
that was his last backhill photo shoot.
Yep.
Before he went up to the pro team.
Yep.
And there was tension. Do you remember this?
Tell me more.
There was tension between him and the other kids because, like, Mikey was a sick rider, but Mikey wasn't as, you know, well known, or, you know, and so there was tension in the house around with the kids. They were trying to one up each other.
Well, it was Sean's birthday the other day, and I made a note on just that observation and trying to, and I kept note of that over the years. But what happens in hockey is that if you look at the statistics of the age of hockey players, most of them are born in first quarter, January, February, March.
Right.
And when you're a little kid at 12 years old, when you're born in, you know, February,
Yeah.
and then you got another kid that was born in November,
Yeah.
physical, you know, jump that you have in those months gives you, you know, you're just a physically bigger kid with more
Right.
coordination, and so you accelerate quicker. It
Yeah.
catches up later,
Sure.
but at that phase, we're 12, and this is what we're talking about, is 12-year-olds. Sean was a lot smaller than Mikey Rentz.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Mikey was, and they would bully Sean to the
Yeah.
point where Sean would cry.
They did.
And it was like, it was very uncomfortable. I'm sure for you as the person in charge, like,
Yeah, I was trying to, like, keep the peace.
yeah. And it got competitive again, because the way it worked, it totally made sense for backhill, was that if you shouldn't be having 20-year-olds on a kid's clothing program, right? And so it made sense. And if you really wanted to accelerate or keep going with Burton, you had to make the team. And that's the year after Sean, the first year they built the super pipes up at Hood.
Yeah.
All the U.S. team was there. Keir Dillon,
Yep.
Ross Powers, Abe Teeter. They were all there that day, and coaching and helping and instigate and maybe being part of the, you know, the process of who gets on the team next. But Sean, at that age too, you're still light. Like he had a 142 board, and he didn't have a lot of weight to carry the speed.
And his stance was so wide.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like 4 inches in front of each foot.
Figured out.
Yeah.
But he was sprocking.
Yeah.
Like he was going just as big as Ross Powers.
For sure.
I remember Keir Dillon giving him pointers on front side inverts, and he'd pick it up like that.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen so much progression in a single weekend, because they'd go back down to the you know, the house, the flop house, and he'd watch videos.
Yeah.
And it was like he'd sit there and watch, and it was like a computer being programmed.
Absorb.
In and in and in, and then the next day he'd go up and he'd translate it, and it was like,
that's intimidating
whoa.
stuff. Because I mean, there's certain people that do that with music. There's people that do it with a skateboard. There's people that do it with a snowboard, and it just comes. And Randy, my friend Randy Gaetano, is a really good surfer, skateboarder, snowboarder, musician, artist.
I
And
hate
like,
those guys.
Something about all of that just comes easy to certain people.
Yep. But also, when we're talking about 12-year-old Shaun White, it makes me what I don't know about Vince is an 8-year-old version of yourself.
Oof.
Like, I want to know this kid in Jersey, and it's like somehow there was a spark, something sparked your interest to get sideways and become, you know, that must have been the best job ever, landing at Burton, right?
Yeah.
And what was happening, I don't know, between 8 and 10 years old that got you here?
It was my brother Mike. My brother Mike was snowboarding in 80, 81, got his first board, and was just messing around on Floods Hill in South Orange. And we were skateboarding, just in the neighborhood and stuff. And I guess I had a pretty conservative school sort of upbringing. And so it was like Catholic school, but then you had this skateboard, snowboard thing that was like where you went to be yourself. And I think that's what my parents really never got, at least my mom. Like, if my hair got longer and I was skateboarding and I was wearing weird stuff and wearing my Vision streetwears and long shorts and stuff. Like, she didn't get it, but it was our way of sort of like actually being who we wanted to be. So I credit that with like opening our minds up to like creativity, and everyone was better at this than I was. I wasn't a great skateboarder or snowboarder, but I ended up hanging out with people that were inspiring to be around. And once we met people like Randy and Scott and Jet, and Shem Roos, Gavin, my brothers and I just sort of like realized how much fun you could have just dorking around on skateboards and snowboards. And snowboarding in the 80s, you were ridiculed for it. Same thing with skateboarding. Mm-hmm. You know, you were like told not to go places and told you were weird, and that just fed the energy, right? So you always want to have an enemy. You know, you always want to have like, same in business, like you want to have something that you're sort of secretly fighting against. So we had, you know, the cops when we were skateboarding, or like skiers, snowboarding. And so that all fed into this like sort of friendly competitive thing. And yeah, just being around people that were better at creative endeavors than me in the early days, like that actually, those guys became Instrument. Well, we kind of jumped past the Burton thing, but I was working at Burton and I'm like, you know, I don't think I can stay here really any longer. Like my time had run out there.
There's a shower scene here, isn't there?
Yes.
Is this the part where we get naked?
You told me that we were
told
supposed.
You you're gonna have to get naked.
So I had decided to leave Burton, made that happen, and then I was in the shower, and I was trying to come up with a name for this. Is this the story you're thinking of?
Yeah.
I was trying to come up with a name for this thing because I had sort of written this business plan, but I didn't have a name for it. And you know, you think in the shower, you just sit there, it's warm water, and you're like, okay. So I'm thinking, and I was into the band Fugazi, and they had put out this documentary called Instrument. And what was cool about the documentary was like, it was just a pretty raw, Jem Cohen did it. It's pretty raw, just followed the band around. You know, it was inspiring to see. And I always respected that band. And I was like, shit, Instrument. Is there, in my head, the first thing was like, is anybody using that for anything? I kind of went through my mind, Rolodex. No. Is a domain name available? So I get out of the shower, go to my computer, check the domain name. It was available. I'm sitting at my desk with my underwear, towel, or whatever, and I forget to buy it, and then it's gone. 3 days later, I go back to buy it. Somebody freaking bought it. So I'm like, well, how did that happen? Like, somebody saw my search. Instrument.com was available for $10. Ended up paying way more for it later. So anyway, the name came up. It was inspired by the band Fugazi because those guys always said like they just wanted to be a great band. It wasn't about making money for records. It wasn't about you know, charging a lot at their shows. They always charged $5 to get in, $10 for their records. They just wanted to be a great band. They wanted to kind of be a model of like how to be a band. And so the name kind of stuck. The original name for the company was Instrument Marketing, because I always felt like, you know, marketing was sort of this big idea that you could boil down to something simpler. And so I called it Instrument Marketing. Eventually, we just called it Instrument. But Dennis Kegler helped me with the brand.
That guy.
First logo. Mike Wood built the first website for it.
I haven't heard that name in a bit.
Yep. So anyway, I convinced my snowboarder friends to like join me in this quest of creating a better type of creative agency through freelancers. So I was like, you guys stay freelance, do what you need to do. I'm going to go find work for you. I'll take a portion of the job. But we didn't make that much money because, you know, 20% of not much is not much. And so over time, it just became hard to like, I was selling mortgages. I worked for Voodoo Balance Boards while I was running Instrument.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. I was the marketing director for Voodoo Balance Boards. I was originating mortgages, and I was running Instrument, all out of the Chicken Bone in Burlington. You remember that
really
place?
the name.
Huh?
I didn't know I had a name.
The Chicken Bone?
Yeah.
So the house where I started Instrument used to be the Chicken Bone Cafe. It was right up the street from JDK, and they had a huge chicken on the roof. Mm-hmm. And my brother ended up renting the downstairs, and he rented me the apartment upstairs. And it was 2 rooms and a living room, and like one room was my office, one room was my bedroom. So I would just get up in my underwear and go to work. And that's where instruments started. Chicken Bone Cafe. So Michael Jagger called it the Chicken Bone Penthouse. He's like, oh, instruments started in the Chicken Bone Penthouse.
What a name.
Yeah.
That's a good story. But also you're mentioning Michael Jagger too. And again, at this time, for a young entrepreneur, are there mentors that were important to your trajectory?
Yeah. So I think Michael and Jake, were pretty inspiring in the early days. But, my dad was an attorney, and so his business background and sort of what he did was so wildly different from what we were trying to do. Mm-hmm. So it was really just sort of a frontier of unknown. And the unknown is kind of what you have to fight against. You just have no idea if it's going to work, how it's going to work. You have no idea. And so each day or week, you're like, okay, here's where I'm at. What can I do to push this forward? What can I do to push that forward? I don't know where it's going to go. So nobody's pointing you in any direction. So I had sort of mentors, or not mentors that were helping me, but I had like North Stars, like, oh, this is cool. I like what they're doing. That's inspiring. But otherwise, we were charting like a totally new path.
And in that path, Justin Lewis shows up.
Yeah.
And
in Vermont.
I just don't see the connection, to be honest.
Right.
It seems like an odd couple to me.
Yes.
In a respectful way.
Oh, yeah. Well,
but
it was.
I don't know how. Did you guys bump into each other at a coffee shop? Or
Dude,
what was the story?
It's as bizarre as this story. Like,
and he's
this
showing us a
out
picture of the face again.
Yeah.
If you're not watching the YouTube podcast,
the story of the face, like, pretty organic. So I met him through other friends, like not really close friends, but just sort of people I had known in Burlington. And he was a self-taught web developer, who had gotten out of the Marines and just taught himself HTML and CSS like on his own. And he was working for a software company in Burlington. And we needed someone to help us build a website for a coffee company in Vermont, in Burlington. So my friend Mike and I were working together at the time, and we brought Justin in to help build this website. And we're working on it for a few months, and Justin's in there, and he comes in on his off time. And at this point, we were in a little office down on the waterfront in Burlington, right on the water. And a pretty nice place to work, but you can get distracted by looking at Lake Champlain all the time. And my partner Mike was sort of famous for that. But Justin would come in and just hammer. I mean, talk about driven. So he helped build this website, and I remember sitting around it, just having lunch. We got takeout or burritos or whatever. And I kind of just looked at him. This is one of those turning points, like we talked about a little bit, like these moments. And I don't know what prompted me to say it. We'd never talked about it before. I had never talked to my partner Mike about it. And I just said to Jay, like, hey, do you want to quit your job and just do this with us full time? Literally out of nowhere, not preconceived. And he was like, yeah, I definitely want to do that. That is it. That's the moment. And so pretty soon after, he quit his job, and we just started trying to sell websites. And he was building content management systems and back-end systems for sites that had never been built before. He's just really, really good at what he did. And that was it. It sort of changed the trajectory of Instrument from there, from a group of creatives trying to sell creative services to like marketing with a focus on the internet.
Way ahead of your time. Really.
Yeah. I mean, but I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that I knew he could do something that sort of felt like magic, because the internet was magic to people that didn't really know how it worked. And we together could help sell that. And by sell, what I mean is like we were just telling people how it was going to help them. We weren't selling something that wasn't useful. You know what I mean? We weren't overselling it. They just needed it, and we were able to like translate how it was going to get them from here to there.
And what year is this?
2004. So wrote the business plan in 2002, met Justin in 2004, and we started plotting our move to Portland.
That's my next question.
Yeah.
Why here? I mean, you have all the connections, friends, family are on the East Coast. Why Portland?
There's no developers in Burlington, Vermont.
Interesting.
So there's really not that many web developers, and there was only a few big businesses that we could count on as clients. We had done work for Burton. We had done work for some of the other brands and, agencies in town, but Burlington's pretty small. And so at the time, our wives were kind of like, I might want to move somewhere. And my wife was looking at Wieden & Kennedy and Nike. She was at Jagger at the time. Mm-hmm. And so Justin and I kind of looked at a map, and we picked out like 3 or 4 cities, and the wives were kind of down with those ideas. And he really picked at Portland because it had like a thriving tech community. So we knew that there were more web developers there. And he moved out before we did and went to the town storage building, found our studio, which is this shitty warehouse above Burnside, took a picture of this room and sent it to me. And he's like, this is where we're going to be. And I'm like, all right, man, I'm coming. So he set up shop before we got here, and it was just the 2 of us. So that's when we had to move on from our third partner, who stayed in Vermont.
And that's always interesting with every journey. It's always a journey. It seems like you're doing business with friends. It seems like a wonderful start to a career.
Yeah.
But yet there are these pivots and these turning points and these hardships. Are you okay sharing some of that?
For sure. So I personally think working with friends makes all those things easier, because you can be totally honest with your friends. If you and I were in a dispute, you would know if I came to you and I said, hey, this is what's going on. It wouldn't be me like doing you wrong. It'd be me doing you right, because we're friends. And so talking to my buddy Mike, about what we wanted to do with the business, it wasn't easy, but it made sense to him that like the 2 of us were moving to Portland. We were going to take part of the business. He was going to keep the other part. And then ultimately those 2 things kind of drifted further apart, and it just made sense from a business standpoint and from a personal standpoint to not try to stay connected to Burlington. So it was fair. It was an easy conversation because I'm so like emotionally connected to people. I never wanted to bum anyone out. But Justin is a driver. I mean, he was the one who was like, look, if this thing is going to become a rocket ship, which he wanted it to be, and we knew it could be, we need to not be connected to this thing in Burlington anymore. And we made that call, had the tough conversation. And like every tough conversation you have is like a little mini launch point. I can name 10 of them. That was one of the first ones.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So again, you're going to have a hardship, but you put it on. It's a mini rocket to the next level. Then you'd mentioned friends, and I think if we were to do a word cloud right now, friends would be very big in a good way.
For sure.
And I want to challenge you a bit too on your position on doing business with friends, as I appreciate it. But again, there's an old saying, it says, don't do business with your friends or family.
Yeah, well, that's what I was told.
And for a lot of reasons, right? Keep church and state separate. It's like if there's just a hardship, then at least you can always still have those relationships with your friends and family. Yeah. And obviously you've proven that wrong. Yeah. And so tell me why.
Why try it, or why?
Why would, again, there's some people out listening and they're wanting to do a job, start a business with their friend, and they're having the same conversation right now. And so sell it.
And so the rule was like, don't work with your friends because it can make decision making harder later. You might not make the hard decision. You might not be able to pivot fast enough. And I always felt like even if I didn't know the people ahead of time, I would treat them like my friends. So everyone we hired, I treated as if they were a friend. I wanted to treat them well. I wanted them to have an incredible experience. I wanted them to thrive as I would any friend. And so work with your friends isn't just about like actually find friends to start a business with. It's like the attitude with which you conduct yourself in the building. So I have this thing where like, if you're working with your friends, you're going to like clean up behind them. You're going to like wipe the sink down. You're going to plunge the toilet. You're going to do the things to help your friends around the office. And that is just a different attitude, a different way of going about your day at a business, as opposed to being in an office where everyone's an adversary, or you're competing for resources, or you're competing for, I want to work on that client or this client. If your attitude is like, we're working with friends, it's a totally different vibe. It created this place where we were doing it for each other. Like the business served all of us, but we got to serve the business so that it continues to thrive and give back to us. So if you have generous partners and generous founders and managers, and you have people that want to see this enterprise grow, it's going to get back to them. And then everybody's going to rise with it. So I know that sounds kind of hippie or like really philosophical, but it sort of starts with this attitude of like, if you're working with your friends, you're going to treat things differently.
I buy into that.
Yeah.
I like that point of view.
Yeah.
And we'll
I mean, what's the alternative? You know, like work with jerks. You know, it's like, that doesn't sound very fun.
Well, thinking even working with Justin, if you're saying like he's the go-getter and he's got a big vision of where this thing's going to go, and it's like that may mean leaving, friends behind and having to, fire them.
Totally.
Because it's not working, and you have a bigger vision, and so that's where the challenge could be. And
it was a challenge, but to be honest, like the folks that we had to let go or that left on their own accord, I still felt like we were treating them as friends because we knew that like it wasn't working. So I always felt like we were going to do right by these people, even if they had to leave, and we were making that decision for them. And so it's not easy to walk into a room and tell somebody they don't have a job anymore. It's really, really hard. And we've done it. But I always felt like I was doing them a solid by helping them understand the perspective of where we're at. We've given them, chances. We've given them feedback. They've had a really fair experience. We've been generous. And so like, hey, this isn't going to be what you want it to be or what we want it to be. So it makes sense to kind of end this the way it is. And we're going to take care of you. Make sure you get a job. Make sure you have money to get through the next few months, whatever the deal was. And it's like, it launches them to the next thing. And I kind of take pride on like most of the people that we've had those conversations with. Like if I ran into them on the street, we'd probably hug it out. I hope.
All right, let's keep it moving. I'm going to put up a picture here of, we'll call it, right now, this is the Outpost in Portland. But now Instrument in our chronological line here has gone all the way out here to the West Coast. You guys have set up shop at right above the Burnside Skateboard Park.
Yeah.
And you grew from there.
Yeah. So we outgrew every space we ever moved into. We were renting out space. Do you remember Rob Farrington? You know Rob.
Of course.
Is he still here?
No, he's...
So Rob was a tenant of ours in Vermont and then in Portland for like years. Rob was like our sort of, he rented a desk from us, but rent was like a mellow term.
And Rob's a photographer.
Yeah. Great photographer, great post-production guy. And so we had space up in the town storage building. And then we outgrew that, moved into a smaller building. Smaller than we are now, but bigger than we were in. And then we moved over to Alberta. We actually built out a space, which was kind of a big deal. We were like 12 employees, and we knew we needed more. Okay, so this is around when JD was renting a desk from us over on MLK by Gold Rush Coffee, which was like our go-to spot. And Salt and Straw had a cart out in front in the courtyard.
Small world.
I mean, their first thing.
Wow.
And so we built this space out, and we kind of started growing to 15, 20. And we rented the space next door. And then 4th of July, this is a day of infamy. Portland goes off on the 4th of July. It's like Baghdad down here. Stuff's blowing up. Like people are shooting fireworks. This was back in the day. And I'm over at Faz's house in Northeast Portland with Chuck, Draplin, and we're having a 4th of July party, and we're shooting bottle rockets at each other and all kinds of stuff. And I get a text like, hey, man, I think your building's on fire. And I'm like, son of a... So I get in the car, I fucking haul ass over there, and they're pouring water into the building. Like, there's no flames visible, but I could see water, I'll never forget it, coming through the can lights, like just streaming down. We had computers in there. And so I go to the fire marshal, and I'm like, look, dude, this is my building. I need to get up there and get my QuickBooks file, which is on a flash drive in my desk drawer. Every night I backed up to QuickBooks. I was doing all the QuickBooks. And so I'm like, if I can get that flash drive, we're in business because it has all our billing and our client names. And, people still owe us money. So he's like, all right, I'll take you up there. So I go up there, man, and it's bad. 3 inches of water on the ground, soot everywhere.
Any pictures?
Yeah, I've got pictures.
Send them to me.
I will send you pictures. So we clean up what we could. I was squeegeeing water all night. I stayed in the building all night because the doors and windows are blown open. I never left the building. I stayed awake all night, stayed with the building. And then, ironically, like most of that furniture made its way out of there into the Outpost, which was this big warehouse, old shipbuilding facility in Northeast Portland. And we moved into the Outpost, and ironically, that fire, which was a serious hardship, you could have been done. I mean, we were kind of in a place where like we were working for Nike, and we were like right at that sort of like growth moment, and then fire, burns your building out. And we were lucky to find the Outpost, moved everything in there. So ironically, like we went from 35 or 40 in that building in Alberta. The Outpost gave us room to grow to, 90.
So there's a picture here of 90 people in the Outpost.
Totally.
I'll post that.
And so, out of that crazy hardship moment where you're like, shit, this could all be done. Because we had a few of them. People end up pulling together. But I don't want to put too much weight on it, but I do credit a lot of that to like people gave a shit about instrument when we had the fire. They gave a shit to hold it together while we figured out where we were going to go. And we didn't have to convince them to hold it together. They wanted to hold it together. And so we moved into the Outpost, and then it just kind of flourished from there. But it was similar to this, where like half walls, no real closed conference rooms, one bathroom for like 60 people. Eventually we built more bathrooms. I mean, it was pretty raw, but the best place to have a party, best place to pull your truck or your motorcycle into and do whatever you want to do. So it was fun.
But tell me more about this.
Mark
Again,
Warren,
showing a picture of
an artist in town. We didn't have any conference rooms, and so this is part of that solidarity piece. We didn't have any conference rooms. We needed a place to have like difficult meetings, and so our friend Mark Warren Jock had done a mural in every instrument office. So JD said, "Hey man, can you like build us?" He was building these tree houses, like back in Tim Karpinski's yard and people's yards. Like he was building these tree houses that you could like hang out in. And so we said, hey, build us a treehouse for the Outpost. And so he went and he found all pallets and just around Portland, like found wood and just started building. It was like the Death Star. Like it just came together in pieces. It looked like this thing. We're like, what the hell are you doing? So he built a little teepee, and it turned out to be an incredible meeting space. I mean, talk about intimacy. Like there's a reason why those types of spaces like foster good conversation and connection. So, I mean, they had it right back in, the day with Native Americans. And so that was our first conference room. And then that teepee became sort of an unofficial symbol of solidarity, of like coming out of the ashes into the Outpost, and like we had a place. So then it kind of became a symbol that we adopted, and then the symbol faded. But yeah, that was pretty cool. That's where the hard conversations happened, because it was only like halfway quiet spot in the whole place, to like have a review. I did all my reviews in there. We ended up soundproofing it. We did podcasts in there. We would record audio in there for client work.
You guys used to have like lunch bands, musicians come in and
So we had this thing called TP sessions, where we'd invite whoever was in town to do a show. If somebody knew somebody or knew a musician, they'd just bring them in. And we had some pretty incredible acts. I mean, David Bizon, we had Nathaniel Rateliff come in. We had a bunch of just local bands, and I would give them a check for like $100 and share a drink with them, and we'd just order out food, and they were pretty organic little musical moments in there. But the artists loved it because they would get this insane sound. They never got to play in a place like that, so it was cool, man. That building let us do a lot of things.
Well, you're able to expand.
Yeah.
You didn't have to. It's one of the things in business is like they advise you not to actually buy into a space for too long, because if you grow or go down, then you have to change, and it's expensive to move, and a new lease, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And I think probably the rent was probably cheap enough that.
So cheap.
And then
I don't even want to tell you this per square foot number over there.
Just imagine.
It was low.
And there is a reason for it, and I enjoyed those. Again, it was sort of a trend too, in having these open warehouse spaces for creative teams, and they're almost gentrifying neighborhoods that were the next to kind of get yupped out, like the Pearl District and in our city of Portland anyway, and I'm sure every city had that going on.
Yeah.
But those conversations and connections that everybody would make was part of that glue that you're talking about.
Totally.
It's like they just wanted to be together to make the thing work, so
Yeah.
you can sustain sustain a living. You needed the.
When you walked into that building, probably when you walked in here, you're just like, whoa, what could we do in here? You could do anything in there. But we met a lot of local business owners, and things flourished around us. And we were always drawn to the east side, east side port. We always stayed over here. Obviously, rent was lower than being over on the west side in the Pearl, and that was kind of the original, like side effect. But like seeing Alberta grow, I mean, when we designed our space there, like Alberta wasn't much, and it sort of started growing. And same with when we moved over to Williams and Fremont, or Williams and Vancouver, or Fremont and Williams, sorry, and built the one north over there.
Well, before we get to that building, because
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a story there, but there's on the brand side for Instrument, you guys came forward in truth, effort, and courage.
Oh man.
Tell me, why these three words?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. So let's say you're working with friends, okay? You're going to tell them the truth. You're going to put effort in. Like, these are pretty core values of, like, why you want to do good business. You don't want to lie. You're not going to be lazy, and you want to be brave, so you have courage. And so it's like you've got to have courage to do this, to go on a limb, to put your name on a lease, to sign a loan, to hire people. Like, that takes courage. It also takes courage to sit in a client room and say, hey, I don't think that's the right idea, or hey, this is what we really believe. So like if you've got to have those core values, I think, to do things right. And we always kind of we wanted to do things right. Why be in business otherwise? So those words really stuck. And then our employees kind of picked up on it, and they designed this incredible lockup of these words, and it ended up on a T-shirt, which we gave away to clients. And my friend was wearing the T-shirt yesterday. I still love it. It stayed pretty powerful.
It's clean.
What's that?
It's very clean.
It's clean, but it's also like it's inarguable. And they're also like values you can fall back on. Like if you're having a bad day and you got to go into a tough meeting, you sort of just fall back on those values. And those words are just sort of a baseline for like, all right, here's how I have to act, or here's how I should act. And because we all screw up, like we all lose ourselves. But I think if you sort of have this history of, well, let's rely on this, and this sort of base level of values has really worked for us over the years.
And now you take those values and you move to the new 30,000 square foot office.
Yeah.
And
Spent a lot more.
you spent a ton of money.
Yeah.
That was like one of the biggest moves at the time in the
For sure.
city, and it's a beautiful, beautiful building.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. I mean, we had a choice back then of like leveraging the business to buy a building, which was really risky. I mean, all of us would sign off on that, or being a tenant somewhere. And so we decided to look into the designing and building a building, but not owning it. And so we knew that there was this culture we wanted to foster. And so JD and the architects, which we worked with, Holst at the time, designed this space to kind of foster this way we wanted to do business. So it's all open. You have a central atrium, and everyone can see everybody else. You can yell to people across the building, 130 people. You could see each other. You can yell. There's a connection. I think JD described it as like a coffee shop mixed with a college campus. Sort of the vibe was collaborative, creative, open, but still allowed you to like get into a room and do your work and things like that. So, just like, again, it was an inspiring moment for our employees because we were investing in the future long term. We weren't trying to suck money out of the thing. And like, it was like, hey, we're continuing to build this thing. There's really no ceiling. Like we didn't impose a ceiling or sort of financial goals. It was just like, let's keep doing it. And people are like, well, why are you still doing it? Or how does it? And it's like, well, it's still working, so we're going to keep doing it. So it just kept working.
And there's a question that I've got. It's something that you guys set up that I think maybe is unique, or maybe part of your success is, again, explain the reasons behind instrument T models and how that contributed to the success of the company.
Yeah, so we kind of stole the idea from other agencies. It wasn't a totally unique idea to have creative teams. JDK had them for years, and we really appreciated sort of how they created teams that had a little life of their own. They named their teams. You know, you had UN and you had different teams. I won't remember them all, but friends will remember them. And they ended up having a life of their own. And so when we were growing Instrument, we started realizing two things. One, healthy competition within the studio is not a bad thing. And so you create these teams that are all in the same building. They're all doing the same thing, but they're competing sort of for different client work, you know, friendly wise. And then it also, what it does, it allows leaders to emerge within those teams. So as we created teams, we needed leadership for each of those teams. You wanted a tech lead, a creative lead, and an account lead, basically. And so it allowed us to say, hey, you are an account director, take this team, and you'll run the business side. You are a technical director. You're going to run the tech side of this team. And each of those teams kind of became like mini agencies within our agency. From the client side, they were like, oh, cool, I get to work with my 10 or 12 people that I love and I know, and it feels like a boutique agency. But you're inside an agency of 100 people or 90 or, 70, whatever the number was. And so from the client side, it gave them like a team that they could resonate with and sort of jive with, but they had access to more resources if they needed it. From the inside, it gave employees a sense of like, oh, I'm cool, I'm part of a team. It's a tight-knit unit. I love these people. And also like, so from the business side, though, what it did was it gave us a way to incentivize team leaders to grow. And so you had all these little agencies within Instrument, little teams that were growing their business, and that grew the whole business. And so we created incentives, for people to basically like see their team grow and benefit from that as they grew as an employee, as a leader. It's a management problem to have all these teams, but it gave us a way to compartmentalize the business. And then I'm going deep on this.
No, I appreciate it.
So once we had teams, we needed a system to watch the performance of those teams and to allow the teams to understand the impact of their decisions, because teams had autonomy around who they hired, how many people they hired, which clients they took on or didn't take on. But they needed a way to see the impact of that on their financials or their sort of team performance. So Justin and the development team built a system that allowed us to let the team leaders actually see the impact of their decisions on, they have got this many leads that are potentially worth this amount of money, and if they take 3 of them, they'll be this busy, they'll be oversubscribed, or they won't be busy enough. And so if they didn't have enough leads in the system to make their numbers for the month, they'd have to go out and find more work. And so it just gave people like intelligence on how their teams were operating. So if we had teams but we didn't have this system to kind of help them understand how they were doing, it would have been a mess. But what it actually did was we had a scale of like if you were undersubscribed or oversubscribed based on your total possible hours. And if the teams hit the red zone, we knew things were going to be bad. You would think, okay, you got 110%, of your work. That's not a good thing. So the sweet spot was always around 80%. And if you drop below 80, that was a little sketchy. But if you were up in the 90s or 100s, it's not sustainable either. So, but that fit the values of like work-life balance. So you had this system for us to actually know that like you were either burning your people out and we were going to have an attrition problem, or people weren't busy enough, so they were bored and they were going to quit.
We could go so deep here.
Oh, dude.
It's like there's so
I'm
many
rambling.
stories that we could share here, but
Yeah,
I think
1,000.
for our audience and our podcast today is like
I guess
more about
what I would say is like teams are great to foster creativity and culture, but you need a way to keep those teams sort of managed sustainably, to keep people happy, energized, not overworked, not underworked. So that was sort of the key to that, like that structure.
I love it.
Yeah.
But going into another question,
Yeah.
if I can move it a little bit again.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about brand. One of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
And again, let's talk about 3 brands that you're admiring, big or small. And
Yeah.
you can't talk about Apple.
Yeah.
You
You mean right now?
Yeah, brands that you're driving on.
Not necessarily clients.
No, Just the idea of brand. And again, I think the other one is give me a definition of what you think brand means.
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not like a brand guy. It's not like in my heart to really like, I know what a good brand feels like and what it looks like, but it's not automatic for me to just spout about brands all day. Like I think the brands that I respect the most are the ones that are not trying so hard and who are honest and there's like a humility to what they're doing. Because here's the deal. So I hope this makes sense. So in any industry, in any product, there's a natural growth or not growth to what's going to happen. There's only so much a brand can do to capitalize on an opportunity, I think. So let's say you start a sock brand, okay, Stance, whatever. There's a market size and an opportunity that Stance could take advantage of, but that's going to naturally happen. What I hate is when brands act in a way that they're like clawing at things that just aren't there. Do you know what I mean?
So for Stance,
Yeah.
going into category innovation and or markets that just don't make sense for their brand, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's like trying too hard. It's like I've seen brands do collaborations, and this is a common area where they do collabs that are supposed to extend their brand, but it actually makes their brand look worse. And it's like you're just trying too hard. Like they're just socks, okay? Like make great socks. JD has this quote. I think it's an Ian MacKay quote from Fugazi. And he's like, we're like a baker. We just make bread for people. And if we make good bread, people are going to love it. They're going to come buy our bread. And that's it. It's kind of like having the discipline to say no. You know what I mean? Instead of just try. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the ego gets in the way, and these people, get this brand in their head, and they really just want to see it succeed. But I'm like, you really got to be careful, because you'll spin your wheels and spend a bunch of money and open a shop in SoCal that fails and end up losing your company.
Ouch.
They're
For a
friends.
guy
These
that
are
doesn't
friends.
have an opinion about brand, I think you did pretty good.
Yeah.
Give yourself a little credit.
That's just one angle.
It's a deep topic. For
Yeah.
sure. I think you did a great answer there.
Yeah.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah, man.
The future. So again, it's like this. Right now, we're in a conversation, and everybody's in a conversation about AI.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's not going away. And what I love is an instrument I feel would probably be more in tune to it, being more digitally driven agency.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts, inspiration, ideas, help?
Well, over the years, like I guess I point to this, over the years working at Instrument in technology, things have come up. Mobile, social, two big trends, right? And I haven't talked to folks at Instrument about this. This is just me sort of coming at it from my point of view. I think Instrument has always had a way of like dipping our toes in things, but not saying this is the future of blah, blah, blah. Like you need to do this. Like obviously e-commerce, pretty simple equation. Put stuff online, sell it. But, we always took the tact of like knowing what's going on and watching it carefully, but not putting all our eggs in sort of a certain basket, because inevitably you have this spike of interest and spike of investment, and then it sort of like levels out to like, here's the real utility of the thing. So I would expect that Instrument or anybody who's smart would kind of like really understand the core value of artificial intelligence, what the dangers are, which there are a lot, what the costs are, which there's costs in environmental costs, there's costs in, climate costs, there's costs in just servers. I mean, I've heard some stats around AI that like, the cost of compute for these startups is like 4 times what their potential revenue is, stuff like that. And so the investment in AI isn't paying off yet. It might take 10 or 20 years, and I do believe in it. I believe that this will help humanity. I want to believe. I've got all the books. I've read all the naysayers and all the positives. Like I've sort of done the research and sort of come to my own, like, this is going to be good, but like the internet, there's going to be some bad with it. But I sort of tend to come at it with optimism and say, like, look, if we do this in the right way and we use it for the right reasons, it's just another tool in the shed, like the internet, like commerce, communication, social media. There's so many unknowns. I think I've always taken like a let's wait and see. Cool, that seems cool. But if it's going to be good, if it's going to be really good, you'll know it. If I make socks that are better than the socks over there, it'll happen. But you can't force people to take your socks.
Agreed. And if you haven't figured it out yet, too, again, how's Ben treating you? Because the thing that I'm also interested in is you've been out of Instrument now for how long?
2 years, more than 2 years. So formally, I took a leave of absence in 2020, and then the sale of Instrument finished up, just this past year.
Well, let's talk about a sale of a big agency.
Yeah, whoa.
Right? Like,
first time for me.
Right. And again, I can't even imagine. I talked to Justin Lewis about it a tiny bit, but
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your insights into that process and anything that you can share. Obviously, you don't have to share numbers or names, et cetera, but just anybody thinking about selling your agency, what would you help them understand?
So, it came down to one of these conversations. I went back, I told you about the one with Justin, where I was like, hey, do you want to partner up with us? I was having these feelings in 2017 or so, 2016, like, hey, there's going to come a time where I have been doing this for 20 years and I'll be 50. And I might want to try to do something else, because Instrument wasn't, when I was a teenager, Instrument wasn't on my wall. Like, that's where I want to end up. So I loved it. And it's incredible. It's the greatest thing I've done besides having my son and
That
and my
photo.
family. That photo is pretty incredible,
Yeah,
too.
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Go-
Highlight.
highlight.
So there were people out there that were emailing us, calling us, cold calling, like, hey, I want to buy your agency, and I'm going to give you blah, blah, blah times your multiple. And I was kind of like, bullshit. This is sort of the no, you're not. This is bait. And so I knew that there was an opportunity out there, but a lot of the first people that start to hit you up are not the people you're actually going to do business with, or that you want to do business with. And so we went down the path with a large technology company and got so far that we had a number and a plan for them to, buy Instrument, and we'd become part of their company. And it generally fit the parameters. But we had one meeting, and in that meeting, there were some cracks in the armor on their promises to let us remain autonomous. And so all three of us came back from that meeting. We sat in the conference room together, and we kind of all looked at each other, and we were like, we can't do this. And it was hard, because you had this way of creating value for you, your families, all your employees was right there in front of you. But we had to say no. We had no other backup plan. And I credit Justin and JD for having the courage to do that. It's like firing a client that's not good for you. You're cutting away business, but it's going to lead to something better. So we sat in that room and we decided we're not going to do this deal. It's the wrong deal for us. So we had nothing after that. We had no plan except to keep running Instrument, which is great. Okay, we're just going to keep running Instrument. We're good. So we took a break from the whole process, because we had 30 meetings. We were flying all over. I had to put nice clothes on. It sucked. Bizarre meetings, some of them, with people that I was just like, what are we doing here? So luckily the three of us all had the same gut feelings on all these meetings. We all knew. And so we waited a few months and kind of went back to work. And then this guy called us and kind of had, a really nice way of talking about how they structured their deals. And they had a history of working with agencies that allowed those founders to stay and do what they did. And we knew that we wanted to stay. We wanted to keep growing. A lot of these places wanted to do a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal where you're out after 3 years. I'm like, dude, we're not leaving. So we ended up doing a 7-year deal, which was kind of unheard of, because it puts the risk back on us to say, okay, we're going to grow for 7 years. So I think the thing I'm most proud of is the leaders of the company participated in the sale of the company, because they were the ones running it, day to day. And we were able to show them what that opportunity was. So when we went to tell our employees about this deal, we were like, look, here's what we want to do and here's why. And here's how everyone is going to see the upside. So they had to trust us in that. And I've now gotten, a dozen notes and letters back from people like, hey, when we sat down and you sketched out that thing on paper, I didn't believe you. But like, you guys made it happen. And that never happens. And so it's an incredible success to find a partner like that would buy your company over time and let you keep running it. And then we turn it over to the leadership team. They're running it today.
Congrats.
So, yeah, man.
That's not always the case. It's
No
a great,
way.
It's a great
I mean,
case
like
study.
we talked about, a lot of these businesses never get off the ground.
Right.
So, yeah, man, it feels good to have done that.
So what are you doing now with your time? Tell me more.
Being a dad, being a husband, when you run a
What'd you call it?
business,
Her first
Yeah.
wife, is
Megan.
yeah, right? That's what you call her? Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Megan and I met in Burlington. She was working at JDK.
Love it.
2006. We got married, and so I'm being a dad, being a husband. When you run a business, like I didn't really focus on myself at all. Like I wasn't taking care of things I needed, right down to like haircuts, and you just ignore. I sort of ignored myself because I was serving the business, and that's an easy way to like. I don't know. It's something I got to work through, but like. I cared so much about the business that I sort of denied myself, so I'm trying to figure that out and focus a little bit on what I want to do and hobbies and things I never took up. And then pretty soon after taking a little time off, like I started getting referred to people who needed help with their business. So a friend like Jim Infuso would call me up and say, hey, I've got a friend who is going through this thing and he could really use like some advice. I'm like, great, send him over. I have imposter syndrome, so I didn't think I didn't know how much I could help him. But after these phone calls, I'd get texts like, dude, you have no idea how much better I feel. And, whatever you said to me helped me through this thing. And like, it comes easy. It's not hard for me to be like, oh, you're in that situation. Here's what you got to do. And I don't dictate. I'm like, here's how this could go. You're probably going to want to do this, and you should think about this. Don't do that. And they're like, yeah. And I just provide these guardrails for them. And then they end up in a place that it would have taken them a year of fucking up to get to. And instead, we figured it out in like an hour. So I named it Small Counsel, which is sort of like, it's just easy. It's just being a counselor. I'd rather be a counselor than a consultant. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but I give my time away right now to friends and friends of friends that, need help with their business. And it's like, it's really rewarding to see them get past a problem faster than they would have. And it's like pretty easy phone call. And it's sort of rewarding to be like, oh, you do know what the fuck you're talking about,
Good for you. That feels authentic to who I know you as. And where can we find you if we want to get a hold of you?
That's a good question. I'm not really doing the LinkedIn thing. Mm-hmm. I think you got to find someone that knows me to get through to me. I don't know.
Better. There's a filter to get to.
Yeah, there's a bit of a filter. And the only reason there's a filter is like I'm not doing this full time.
Right.
I'm doing it pretty organically. But honestly, like I want to if somebody's doing something that that they believe in, that I don't care if it has legs. I'll tell you if it doesn't have legs. If I think your idea is shitty, I'll be honest with you. But if you're doing something that you're passionate about and you're trying to start a business and you don't know where to start or you're in a problem or whatever, like there are people that are out there doing this stuff that can help you. For me, it's like it usually comes through someone who knows what I did and they can say, oh, Vin's the perfect guy. But I'm not always the perfect guy. But I have a network of people I can get you in touch with to figure something out.
All right, we're winding it down.
I just saw your pin.
What you can't see at home is I have a pin from Vin's 50th birthday party where that picture of his tongue out.
Yeah.
So we made a pin. So
too much of that stuff around.
Yeah, and I'll be waiting for that commission check, by the way.
Yeah, so am I.
See, someone's got to pay us.
I don't think we know enough people at Burton anymore to to drag that out of there.
TK hooks me up. It's good.
Huh?
TK hooked me up with stuff. But yeah,
right on.
I'm not making a living at it.
Yep. Yeah, I love seeing his stuff. Like he's been posting some classic stuff.
It's good stuff.
On Instagram.
Looks good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Love it.
And we'll
Thank
see you soon.